Well, namaskar, and thank you for coming for this event. I'd like to give a little overview of the book and then discuss one aspect specifically because Radham is here and he's a top-notch scientist, also interested in Sanskrit, so I have one aspect that I want to highlight and hopefully get his view on that. The book overall is positioning a debate between insiders and outsiders. Insiders being those who view the Sanskrit and Sanskriti traditions as with Shraddha, with their own sadhana. It's part of their sadhana. It's their heritage. They're invested in it. It's not just something random. And it's not just an ordinary language. So these are insiders. Outsiders are those who either reject the Vedic Shruti completely, or they're sort of mildly tolerant to it, but they're not really seriously invested. And they're looking at it objectively as an outsider, studying somebody else's culture or somebody else's identity. Because of the colonial history, which we haven't recovered from, we're still mentally colonized, the outsiders have controlled traditionally the study of Sanskrit, and it's called Indology. It started with the British, and now it's controlled mainly by the Americans. So the empire has shifted across the Atlantic, in a sense. And what used to be European Orientalism became what I'm calling American Orientalism. And now this influence of the West in Sanskrit studies is even more than it used to be in the colonial times, because in the colonial times it used to be white people studying all this, sitting in places like Oxford. Now a huge number of Indians have been sent there to learn this stuff and come back. So now it's being propagated also by Indians. And so it looks more authentic because Indians are talking about it. But the knowledge, the theories, the siddhant, the frameworks are often driven by Western ideas and Western approaches. This is not an anti-West kind of posture. It just says that there are many ways of looking at something, and all these ways are important. But unfortunately, the insider perspective has not been given fair share. It's often not present, or it's present in a denigrated way, or the insiders who are present are not very assertive. So the purpose of this book is to highlight what are the issues an insider would have with the outsider perspective. The outsider perspective being what is controlled by certain prominent Indologists in the United States particularly, and their students in this country. So that's the insider-outsider debate. I started writing this book when I realized that Sringeri Mutt was about to sign up one of the American Ivy Leagues to represent the whole legacy of Adi Shankara by setting up chairs, which some rich NRIs were funding, putting $4 or $5 million per chair. And the Adi Shankara legacy would be in their hands. They would select the professors, the speakers, how to run the show. And it concerned me that we were outsourcing this legacy without proper evaluation of who these people are and what's their history, what have they written about our tradition, and whether they're really qualified. So I started doing a report for the Shankaracharya, and that report started out as a 50-page report, then it became a 100-page report, and the more I studied about these Indologists, the more concerned, more red flags. So now it's a 500-page book. So this book is really the outcome of this research to provide due diligence to the Sringeri people so they can evaluate more about this particular chair. This was going to be announced in August or September or thereabouts 2014. And it was just 4 weeks away from being announced. And when I intervened, they put it on hold. They haven't announced it yet. And we don't know which way it'll go. But we hope this book makes a difference in the evaluation of whether they should do this at all. Because one of my concerns is that the outsiders are the knowledge producers about our culture, and the insiders are consumers. So they are producing the knowledge, we are buying it, consuming it, our children and our media, the ideas on who we are being brought in by somebody else. This is not the case in China. China studies, Mandarin studies, are squarely controlled by their insiders. All the prestigious journals, conferences, academic centers are at China. Same is true for Persian studies in Persia, in Iran, Arabic studies in the Arabian countries, Japan studies, etc. So ours is the only major civilization whose intellectual discourse is controlled from the outside. And our people are very enthusiastic that they are paying attention to us. So it's sort of like a compliment that somebody else is studying us. So the way I located these outsiders is by looking at what is different in their discourse from the way the insiders have seen it. That doesn't mean it's wrong. Sometimes outsiders are better off they're more objective, less emotionally invested, and that can be good. So I'm not opposed to others looking at it. I'm just looking at what exactly is their output that would be red flags. So one of the major concerns is the elimination of the sacred dimension. The whole Paramarthika, what the Vedas call Paramarthika, is being eliminated by this kind of school of thought because they consider it either superstition or they consider it backward, they consider it socially oppressive, exploitation, all of that Marxist critique gets applied. And then a large issue is they consider the whole Vedic tradition, and Sanskrit is sort of the leading culprit, is leading cause of it. The Vedas and Sanskrit together are seen as sort of socially oppressive. They are elitist, Brahmanical, and have oppressed women, Shudras, and so on. Another issue is the way the texts they study are seen through the lens of politics. This is political. The texts are for a political purpose. They were written for the elite to dominate, and that's how they're looking at it. And so the term they use is political philology. Political philology is a methodology to study these texts, and political philology means that philology is the study of texts, scientific or analytical or systematic way of looking at a text, finding its meaning. That's called philology. That is well known. There are many kinds of philologies different people have, but political philology is a new kind of a fashion, which means looking for the political motives in a text. But for us, there's no political motive necessarily. It's a spiritual motive. It's a text may be a sacred text, or a text may be a mathematical text, an astronomical text. It doesn't serve a political purpose. There's no agenda to go and get political power through that text. But that's what political philology is looking for. To respond to that, I've coined the term sacred philology and propose that we should balance the political philology method with the sacred philology method so we have a more even view. The outsiders want to look at it politically. I want to propose also look at it in a sacred way. So I started looking at who are these outsiders, how do you characterize them, what is distinct about them, and how should a traditional scholar from India look at, how would he relate to them? The point is that the sad fact is that the traditional scholars have not done the Purva Paksha of these Western Indologists. Purva Paksha is the art and science of studying the other on your own terms, understanding them in a very respectful way, and then giving an Uttar Paksha response. It's a very old Indian system. The different schools would do Purva Paksha on each other in a very civilized way, a very friendly manner, but very serious debates would happen. And somehow we have not done, our traditionalists have not done Purva Paksha of the dominant Western Indology or dominant schools of Indology. Either they are dismissive, that, oh, it doesn't matter, which is a cop-out, or they're very bombastic, very quick to sort of blast them without even paying attention, without even having taken the time to study, or they are plain old disinterested, living in a silo. They'll give you all kinds of excuses, but the fact is that to keep a tradition vibrant, you must know other people's point of view, and you must engage them. You cannot just isolate and sort of disregard them. You have to engage them. So this absence of Purva Paksha, I believe, is very costly. And this book is a Purva Paksha I'm doing of Western Indology, and I want more traditional scholars to join me. And I feel the traditional scholars are actually, they are the ones who ought to be doing it, not me. But one of the problems they have is they don't know English. A lot of the traditional Sanskrit scholars don't know English. I've given the books of Western Indologists to several traditional scholars and asked them for help. And after days, weeks, even months of trying, they've come back and said, we cannot make head or tail of what they're saying because it's very complicated English. It's not just ordinary English, it's complicated English. And it's not just English, but the idiom, and they are referring to Western thinkers that most of you would never have heard of. Thinkers like Benjamin, thinkers like Gramsci, Vico, which are not part of our general knowledge. So a traditional Sanskrit scholar, it's all kind of blue sky, it's all weird stuff. He has no idea what they're talking about. And yet they're talking about our culture. So even though the subject matter is Sanskrit and Sanskriti and Sanskrit studies, it's being done in such a way that the traditional scholar doesn't feel that he can understand. So what has happened is traditional scholars have withdrawn, and they're not part of the global discourse on Sanskrit studies. This is the issue I'm trying to resolve. Now, the best way to describe, and this is where this segue will take me to a discussion with Rodham, I'm hoping. The best way to describe the school of thought that I'm critiquing is to think of them as a new kind of Charvaks. Earlier Charvaks, who you can call them Charvak 1.0, were a school of thought that dismissed the Vedas, dismissed Shruti. They were dismissives of the sacred transcendental dimension. They were very empirically sharp. They believed in the material world and what you can see with your senses, like modern science in some ways. That is what the truth is. So the claims of the Vedas and all that, any Shruti type idea or spiritual idea would be dismissed. So that's what the Charvaks were. Charvaks were respectable people, very learned, very highly qualified in grammar and Sanskrit, and very fierce fighters and debaters. The Charvak 2.0 are the new Charvaks, that is the subject of my study. In the sense of being materialist and rejecting the Vedas, they are similar to Charvak 1.0. But there are many new qualities that have entered Charvak 2.0, which did not exist previously. The Charvak 2.0 are basically materially very wealthy. They come from rich institutions. They have a lot of power, so they can control the discourse. They can deny the insiders equal play. They are connected with Western power centers. The Charvak 1.0 were not like that. They were modest people, and they were not sort of materially dominating or politically very strong. But the Charvak 2.0 can throttle, can choke the insider view from the Vedic side, which was not the case with Charvak 1.0. So they're more dangerous in a sense to the Vedic point of view. Now, the question is, in what ways has knowledge evolved since the early times till today? In what ways has knowledge changed that with reference to the Charvaks, whether it's 1.0 or 2.0, in what ways have things changed? And this, I think, is the crux of a point I want to discuss with Rodham. I think, and I've known Rodham for 25 years and had many discussions of this kind, so I'm very glad he's here. And as I understand it, Rodham is very strong on empiricism as a basis for establishing truth. And so were the Charvaks. So the Charvaks' idea was, since you cannot establish the truth in the Vedas empirically, so we got to reject them. That kind of a thing. Now, something interesting has happened, which was not possible before. Thanks to the West, actually the West has played a role. Now there is instrumentation to measure not your consciousness, but a correlate with your consciousness. I claim a certain state of consciousness. I claim I'm having a certain experience. Now, we cannot do public verification because it's private. But what we can measure is some brain state. We can, using using an instrument, we can measure a brain state. So if Rajiv says, I did this mantra, this particular technique, and I tried it for 10 years, and I reached a certain state of bliss or anand or whatever the tradition calls it, and if the measurement develops a correlate, and then they try this with 100 other people who've tried the same kind of technique and who also claim that they got the same result. And they look at the correlate, the material, physical correlate, the objective empirical correlate of different meditators' states. And they find something common. So they've isolated a signature. They've isolated a measurable signature which corresponds to a certain claim. So this is an inner claim with an outer measurement. It's not as hard empirically as looking at a galaxy, which 100 people can look through different telescopes and they all conclude the same thing. Or if you look at an electron microscope and do the same experiment, everybody can say we got similar results. We're talking about something which is not as hard and as solid, empirically verifiable in a public sense, but it is not as subjective and arbitrary as it used to be before this particular measurement was available. Because before this measurement was available, if somebody said, I'm experiencing this, well, you don't know what he's talking about. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. There's no way to evaluate it. And this correlative measurement is becoming more and more sophisticated. So we're not at a stage yet where a machine can say this is what you're thinking or you're sad or whatever, but it's really getting there. It's getting to a point where the inner experience as measured by people is getting more and more correlated with outer. I just came across a scientific paper in the US and some people who said that they are now able to, with objective measurements, tell when somebody who's an addict is about to slip back. In other words, whatever he's experiencing, his craving to go back and take that substance, they're able to predict before he actually does it. And hence they can get him help. So this is an example of the inner state, the adhyatmic state, being somewhat measurable, not perfectly. This opens the possibility that we now may have something we could call adhyatmic empiricism. So it is not external empiricism necessarily, but it is a kind of an inner science which is now verifiable. This is now beginning to become possible. And so this opens the possibility that the Charvaks have to now upgrade their posture towards the transcendental claims, the inner claims, the spiritual claims, because to some extent these may be verifiable, in a publicly verifiable sense. And you cannot just simply dismiss all that. So that's one of the points of debate I want to start with the Charvak 2.0, that while the Charvak 2.0 is in his Sanskrit department in Columbia University, he doesn't know about these developments. Across the campus is a neuroscience department in the same university, and they are very excited about all this. So you have the inner science, cognitive science, neuroscience people very excited about what they can now measure and consider to be scientific truth about yogic claims and things of that sort. And yet the department, which is supposed to be studying Sanskrit and whatnot, is very dismissive of all that and thinks it's all humbug and so on. So I'm also trying to create a debate between one kind of Westerner and another kind of Westerner. The scientific Westerner versus the one who studies these traditions in a very classical philological manner. So that's an area I have. I was in an ashram a few days ago where I witnessed little kids demonstrating third eye awakening. Third eye awakening, I couldn't believe it, but one kid after another, you block their eyes, you check it out, you block their eyes, and they are totally blocked, and you get to do it yourself. And then you write whatever you want, and you hold it, and they can read it with eyes closed. Some of them can read it from behind also. And and this has been demonstrated by this group in the US and other places, and they're beginning to come out a little bit more into the open and have scientists measure this empirically so that it's verifiable. Now, Of course, time will tell us exactly how much they've done, what it all means. But these sort of measurable claims are popping up more and more compared to what was the case in the previous eras. So that's maybe we need Charvak 3.0. Maybe we need Charvak 3.0, and the Charvak 2.0 I'm critiquing is obsolete because they are so dismissive, like the Charvak 1.0, they are so dismissive, and also they consider the tradition to be the cause of human rights violations. They're sort of Marxist, leftist view of the whole Sanskriti tradition as a source of problems. Now, I do agree we have social problems. I'm not denying that. Every culture has these social problems, different kinds of social problems. But I don't think a wholesale dismissal of the tradition on that ground is a justified thing. So I could go on, but the clock tells me it's 6:25, and Rodham has to leave at 6:45. So what I want to do is stop and ask Rodham to give his comments, and then we continue the discussion. Thank you very much.